Alright then gang, so Firebase has a built-in authentication service that we can use for our project, which is freaking awesome. Now in this lesson we're going to enable it and allow users to sign up on our website and also log in too. Now I will be moving quite quickly through this because there's quite a lot to do, and also I want the focus of this course to be on functions, not Firebase authentication, but I do have a whole series on Firebase authentication with about 25 videos all about that inside it, so I'll leave the link to that playlist down below, and if you want more information or you want to learn more, then definitely check out that series. So the first step, if we want to use authentication, is to enable it on the back end right here from our project console. So if we go to authentication and if we go to sign in method over here, then we click on the sign in method we want to enable over here and click enable. Then I'm going to click on save like so, and now it's going to allow us to use Firebase authentication to log in, sign up, etc. using email and password, which is what I want. So back to our project. First of all, you'll notice we already grabbed the Firebase auth script and we added it to our HTML, so we can use Firebase auth in our project. Now, I'm going to head back to the authentication JavaScript file over here because this is where we're going to add all of this code. Now, if we go back to our project, first of all, you can see already when we refresh, we see either the login modal or the register modal. So we need to create a function to handle the submission of both of these different forms. And when we submit this form, we want to log in that user, or at least try to log in with that user and their credentials. And this one, we want to register that user. We also have an error field in each one of these forms. If we scroll up, we see we have a paragraph tag in this one and this one down here with a class of error. We can output any error that comes back from Firebase if a user tries to log in, for example, with the wrong credentials, or they try to sign up with an email that's already been taken, or a password that's too short, all that kind of stuff. We're going to output that feedback in one of these two paragraph tags, depending on whether they're trying to log in or register. So there's a lot to do anyway. Let's get started by going to auth.js, and the first thing I want to do is get a reference to a few different elements inside the DOM. So I'm going to paste these in so you don't have to watch me typing them out, but there's three things. We have the register form, so document.querySelector, and we're looking for the register class, and the same for the login form, we're looking for the login class, and that's those two forms right here. So login and register. So we have those. And also the sign out link, so we're storing that in a constant called sign out. It's looking for something with a class of sign-out, which is, if I remember correctly, down here, and that's in the header, the navigation. Okay then, so we have a reference to all of those things that we need now. The first thing I want to do is handle the submission of the register form. I've just noticed I've spelled toggle incorrectly up here. It currently says toggle. So I'm going to just spell that correctly if I can for my own sanity, and then I'm going to create another comment, and this is going to be for the register form. Alright, so we have the register form constant, which we're going to grab, and we're going to add an event listener to that, and the event we want to listen for is the submit event. So when this form is submitted, which by the way happens when you type in your credentials and then maybe press enter, or when you click on a button or a submit that's inside the form. Now we have a button, so when we click on that, then it's going to fire the submit event for the form. So when that happens, we are going to take that event object into the callback function. And the reason we take that event object in is because we need to say e.prevent default, and that's a method which is going to prevent the default action or the default behavior of a form being submitted. So if I submit a form, then normally what will happen is the page refreshes. Now let me just take this off, so it doesn't work, and then let me refresh. If I try to submit the form, it's going to refresh the page. That's the default behavior right there. Now as soon as I add e.prevent default, and this is the register form, so let me save and try this again, go to the register form. If I now do it, it's going to prevent that default action. It's not going to refresh because we don't want that to happen. So the next step is to grab the values that a user has entered into the different input fields. So the way we do that is by, first of all, getting a constant and storing them in. So I'll grab the email first of all, and that is equal to register form, which is the form we have access to. Now we can grab the individual input fields and the values from those fields by referencing the name of each field. So I have, for example, the register form. I can then say dot whatever the name is of an input field to grab that field. So I could say dot email, and it grabs me the input field inside the register form with a name attribute of email. Then to get the value from that input field, I say dot value. Okay, so we're going to do exactly the same thing this time for the password. So let's alt click both of these positions and change that to password like so. So we're grabbing the email value and the password value. And remember, email and password have to match whatever is in the name attributes over here. If this was email Yaya, then we would have to say over here, email Yaya, okay? But it's not, so we don't. So let's rewind and reset them. Okay, cool. So we have those values. Let's just make sure this is working, and we're grabbing those values by logging them to the console, email and password, and save that. So if we try this out, I'm going to open up the console over here by pressing Control, Shift and J, and we can see that console now. Now if I go to register, I'm going to just say ABC, and then I'll say test. If I register, we should see those right here. So we're successfully grabbing those values right now. Now we need to use those values and use Firebase to sign them up to our application. Now to do that, we need to say, first of all, Firebase. Remember, we have access to this Firebase object because we use this script right here. And then from that Firebase object, we need to say we want to use the auth service. So we use the auth method, which again, we have access to because we have this script right here, the auth script. Okay, so from there, we say dot, and then we use a method called create user with email and password. Now, I need to make sure I've spelt this correctly because it is a gigantic method. So create user with email and password. I think that is correct. If it's not, there will be an error, but I'm pretty sure that's correct. Okay, so then we pass in two arguments, the email and also the password. That's those two things we grabbed right here. So this reaches out to our Firebase project on the back end, and it says, hey, I want to create a new user with this email right here, the first parameter, and this is their password. Now this action, it takes some time to do. It's asynchronous and it returns a promise. Now we know when we have a promise returned, we can tack on a dot then method. So I can say dot then right here, and this fires a function when this action is complete, when they've signed the user up. And in that function, we can take in the user object that has just been signed up. So when Firebase takes these credentials and signs up that user, it creates a user object for us, and it gives it us back in case we need it when the action is complete. So I could say right here, console.log, and I'm going to say we've registered, so we know what exactly has happened here. And then we're also going to log out the user to the console as well when we create a new user. Now, I also want to, under that, take the register form, and I'm going to use the reset method, and that clears the fields inside the form. So anything we type in, it's going to clear those and reset the form to the original state. So that's pretty much done, and I don't know where that's come from. It should be reset, not the other one. Reset, like so. Okay, that's pretty much done. One more thing, I am going to add on the catch method, and the catch method is used to catch any errors, because imagine we try to sign up with a password that's too short or with an email that's already been taken by another user. Then Firebase is not going to create this user for us, and instead it's going to return an error object. And in that case, this catch block right here is going to fire this function inside here, and we take in the error that is returned to us from Firebase. Now, we can just log that to the console for now if we want to, or what we could do is we could output this error message inside the paragraph tag, wherever they are, these things right here, okay? So let's do that. So this, remember, is the register form. So we want to output the error inside that paragraph tag inside the register form. Now we already have the register form right here, but we also want to grab the paragraph inside that. Now we can use a query selector, which is now scoped to this register form. So it's going to look only inside this form. And we want to grab the error class inside that. So it's only going to grab the one inside the register form. Then once we have that, we can set the text content of that paragraph tag equal to the error that we receive back, and from that we get a message property. That is the error message coming back from Firebase. Alright, so now then I'm going to try this out. I'm going to come over here and I'm going to hard refresh first of all. I'm going to go to register and I'm going to try to register as a new user. So Sean at thenetninja.co.uk and password is just test123. Now I'm going to register and let's see what happens over here. Okay, cool, it worked. It says registered and this is the user object right here with information about that user if we wanted to use it at this point. Now also it reset the form, but beyond that it's not really done anything else. But don't worry, we'll come to that later in. We know now that this is working. Now if I try to register with something that's not valid, for example, if I just put in here Mario, which is not a valid email, and I'll just say test as well, and I'm going to register. Now you can see the email address is badly formatted. That error message is coming back from Firebase because it's looking at this and saying, well, no, that's not an email, so I'm not going to sign you up. Instead, I'll send you an error message. We catch that and we update the text content of that paragraph tag. Now, if we make this better, so I'll say Mario at abc.com and press register. This time it says password should be at least 6 characters and we only have 4. So this all works. So we've now done the register method. The next thing we need to do is go ahead and log currently registered members in. So I'm going to create a new handler down here. In fact, I'm going to grab this, copy it all because I'm super lazy, and I'm going to say login form right here, paste it down below, and I'm going to change a few things. So this should be a login form because remember, we grabbed that right here, the login form. And then this is the same, prevent default, that's fine. This and this should both be changed to login form. The name attributes are still the same, email and password. We want Firebase to auth. Now we don't want create user with email and password. This time we want sign in with email and password. So sign in with email and password, and we still pass in those 2 arguments, email and then the password. Again, it takes some time, it's asynchronous, so we tack on a .then method to the return promise. We take the user that's logged in if it was successful, and we're going to say logged in right here and output the user, and then we'll take the login form and reset it. If there's an error, we'll take the login form, first of all, grab the error paragraph inside that, and set the text content equal to the error message we get back. So that was simple, right? We just modified this for the login form now. So now if I go to refresh, and I'm going to log in with Sean at the Net Ninja, which I just created a minute ago, and that should work. Sean at the netninja.co.uk, and then down here the password was test123. I'm going to register, and it says Ogin form is not defined. So let's change Ogin to login, like so, and save that and come back here and try this again. So Sean at the netninja.co.uk and then test123 login, and this should work. Awesome. So we logged in and we get the user who just logged in. Now if we try to log in with something that doesn't exist, so Mario at the netninja.co.uk and also whatever the password is, test123, I'm going to try to log in, and this time we get an error that says there is no user record corresponding to this identifier. This user may be deleted. Now, I suppose this error is not something you'd ever really show to a user because it's not really a user-friendly error, even though you probably understand what it means. But you'd probably look at this and say, okay, I'll provide my own error instead that says something like invalid login or something like that. But for now, for our project, this will do. So anyway, that's our login form done, and that's also our register form done. So this is good. Now, there's going to be one more thing we do in this, because in our website, I want to listen for when a user is authenticated, when they're logged in or registered, because when they register, they're automatically logged in, and also when they're not, because when they're not logged in to the application, then I'm going to show them this screen with this modal. If they are authenticated and either they just logged in or they just registered, I don't want to show them all this, and I want to show them the website beneath. Does that make sense? So what I'm going to do now is set up a listener to the Firebase authentication service, and that is going to listen for any kind of authentication changes inside our app. And by that I mean it's going to listen for when a user logs in or logs out and all that kind of stuff. So what I'll do is set up what's known as an AuthListener. Now down here, the way we do this is by saying Firebase and then getting the auth service again, and from there we say .on auth state changed. So what this does is listen for state changes in the authentication of a user. If they've logged in, then it's going to fire a callback function. If they've logged out, it's going to fire the callback function again. And in both cases, we get access to the user who either just signed in or null if they just signed out. So what I'm going to say is if user do something. Now, if the user has just logged in or registered, this is going to evaluate as true. So that means at this point they're logged in. Now, if it evaluates as false, because the user is null, that means they've just logged out and instead will do something else. So what is the thing that I want to do when a user is logged in? Well, I want to hide the authentication wrapper, this whole thing right here, right? And I also want to remove the ActiveClass from both modals, because then it will hide both of those as well. Even though they're nested inside this auth wrapper, I still want to remove both of those classes. So to do that, I'm going to first of all grab the auth wrapper. We have a reference to that from the top and not set it equal to something. I'm going to use the ClassList property to get all the classes, and then I'm going to use the remove method, and I want to remove the open class, and that means it's going to remove the open class from this right here, and when it doesn't have that class, it's not going to show over here. So this will all disappear and we'll see the website underneath. That's when they've just logged in or registered, when they're authenticated. Okay? Now, likewise, I want to grab the modals and hide those. So auth modals, and I want to use a for each method on these to cycle through them, fire a function for each one. We'll take the individual modal each time, then we'll access the class list on each one and remove the active class, because remember, they only show if they have the active class. So we're removing it from each one right here. Okay, does that make sense now? Okay, so now if they are not signed in, if they've just logged out, instead what we want to do is the reverse. We want to add a class of open to the auth wrapper, and we also want to add a class of active to the first auth modal, not both of them, just the first one, to show one of them. So I'm going to grab the auth wrapper again and access the class list. Then I'm going to say I want to add a class, and that class is going to be open. All right, and then I want to grab the auth modals. I just want the first one, so I'm going to use square bracket notation, much like I would an array, and grab the 0th index. That gets me the first modal, so this one right here. So we're going to grab that, and then we're going to access the class list on that as well. And we want to apply the class of active to that so it shows as well. So that means if they've just logged out, then we're going to show the author wrapper and the first modal, which is the login form. Okay, so let's save this. Let's give this a whirl. I'm now going to log in right here. In fact, if I refresh, I should already be logged in, right? Because I logged in or registered as Sean before, and that logged me in. And I've not signed out since, I don't think. So let me try this. If I refresh, nope, okay, I'm not logged in at the minute. Oh, I am. It showed that for a second, and then when it figured out I was logged in, right here, it fired this function. This evaluated as true, so it hid both of these things, and now we can see this jazz right here. Now, I want to sign out at this point, but if I click this, nothing's going to happen because we've not hooked this up. So now let's create some kind of event handler for this to sign a user out. So do we have a reference? Yes, we do. Sign out. So this right here is the link we're going to click. So down here, I'm going to do a comment and say sign out, and I'm going to use the sign out reference, and then I'm going to add an event listener to this, and it's going to listen for a click event. It's going to fire a function when this happens. We don't need the event object. And inside this function, we're going to say firebase.auth to access the auth service. And we're going to use a method called sign out. Simple enough to remember that one. Okay, so this again, asynchronous. When it's done, we can fire a callback function. And all we're going to do right here inside this callback function is just console.log signed out. So we know that that's worked. Now, what's going to happen at this point? Well, it's going to sign us out, right? And that takes some time to do. When it's done, it fires this function and it logs this to the console, but it's also going to do something else. Because remember, we have this listener right here that is listening for auth changes. So when I sign out, this function is going to fire because there's been an authentication change. It's going to evaluate the current user, which will be null because we just logged out and a user no longer exists. Therefore, this will be false. It won't fire this, but it will fire the else clause, and therefore it will open up the auth wrapper and make the first modal in that wrapper active. So if I save this, I'm going to cross my fingers right now, refresh over here, and it's just going to take a second, log me in over there, and if I now try to sign out, then it should show me the modal again. Awesome. If I log in, so Sean at the net ninja.co.uk and test123 should log me in and show me this. Sign out and I see this. Let's see if it works with register. So Mario at the net ninja.co.uk, because when I register I also get a user back, and so this right here is going to evaluate to true, so it should hide them again. And test123 register. Now I'm automatically logged in again, and we can see that I've registered. This is the user logged in. Sign out, and I'm signed out again. Now, watch this. If I log in as Sean at the net ninja.co.uk and then go to test123, log in, I'm logged in, right? Now, if I refresh, we're going to see that login form for a second or two until Firebase figures out that we're actually authenticated and fires this callback function and then hides those things. So we see the website. Now, I don't want that to happen. I don't want to see that modal to begin with while it figures it out. So what I'm going to do is go over to the index page, and I'm going to take off this thing right here, this active class, because if none of these have a class of active to begin with, then none of them are going to show. This auth wrapper will still show, so it will still hide the content behind the auth wrapper. However, none of the modals will show to begin with. Now, it's going to figure out whether I'm logged in or not when it first loads the page, and it's going to fire this function. If I'm logged in, this user object will be true. Therefore, it's going to remove all of these classes, and it's going to show me the content behind it. If I'm not logged in, then it's going to fire this thing right here, and it's going to add the class of open, even though it's already there, so it doesn't really matter the first time round. And it's also going to make one of the modals active, this one, so we then see it, but not to begin with when we first load the page. And I will demo that right now by refreshing, and we don't see that modal. It figures out that we're logged in, and then we go to the page. If I sign out and then refresh, again, we don't see the modal, but now it shows us after it's figured out that we're not logged in, we're not authenticated, okay? So, I know that's been a long video, and it's been kind of off track because this is Cloud Functions, but I really needed to get this sorted out so that we can work with authentication and authentication triggers in our Cloud Functions. This was a necessary evil, I'm afraid, but I did want to fit it all into one video so I'm not wasting loads of time over several videos. And again, if you want more information, if this kind of went over your head a little bit, then definitely check out my authentication series all about Firebase Auth right here on this YouTube channel. The link is going to be down below. But anyway, now we have that sorted, in the next video we can go back to Cloud Functions and start to look at authentication and authentication triggers.